You're listening to the audio companion series for Digital Labor, The Coming Demise of the White-Collar Worker, with author Thomas Young and Kieran Bajwa.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast companion series for the book, Digital Labor. Today, we're going to discuss Chapter 2, Knowledge Worker Automation, and I'm here in the studio with Tom Young, the author of the book.
Hi, Karen. How you doing?
Hey, Tom. How's it going?
All right.
Hey, Tom. Wanted to chat with you briefly about Chapter 2. So you've got this powerful quote at the start of the chapter. So how did it go bankrupt? Or how did you go bankrupt? Two ways, gradually and then suddenly. That's quite powerful.
This is an old Ernest Hemingway quote, and I think it gets to the notion of why digital is different than analog. We talked in a prior chapter about the difference between digital and analog. Analog takes time. It's physical in nature, the way we use the term in the book. If we think about automation around factory robots and mechanization of automation manufacturing lines, those take time to engineer, to design, to build, to deploy. And we saw that happen in the agricultural sector. We saw it happen in the manufacturing sector, but it happened over decade. Agriculture was generations, and then manufacturing was several decades. We won't see it take that long with digital. And it's going to look very much like Ernest Hemingway's quote, "How did you go bankrupt?" He said, gradually and then all of a sudden. And that's the way I think it'll play out here with digital. Wow.
Very, should people be scared or just know it's coming?
It's easy to fearmonger. That gets a lot of attention when people do that. Elon Musk is one to be hyperbolic in some of the things, but if you look at more sober comments that are alarming, if you look at like Sam Harris, gave a nice talk on TED around the emergence of AI, concerns of late Stephen Hawking, Bill Gates, Nick Bostrom. There's a lot of smart people who will sound the alarm bells. There's also people who are what I almost call Pollyanna about the change. Should people be afraid? I think the fear stems from the unknown. So Gallup had a poll where a majority of the people were afraid of AI, and I think that has a lot to do with a lack of knowledge of what it is. But that's not to say that the fears are unfounded. I think there is things to be fearful of. But I think at a minimum, everybody should be concerned about the change if they're not prepared for it. And that's what the purpose of this book is, to help them think that through.
Yeah, because I'm looking through, and you've got a section here on, so what's really different about digital labor? And I think to your point of this could happen all at once, are there certain types of jobs that people, where we're going to see this happen rapidly, or has it already happened, or what do you think?
Well, again, technology progression has been with us since modern civilization, since we moved out of hunter-gatherer societies. So if you look at the agrarian society, it used to be, it was a country of farmers, and we had a tremendous percentage of the people working in the agricultural sector back, I'll say, at the founding of this country, say in 1800. And that time frame, is a majority of jobs and livelihoods were tied to that. Well, that's dropped now to a minuscule amount of the people who have been involved in agricultural. It's largely a mechanized endeavor. Large machines, combines are doing a lot of the work. Industrial farming is dominating. And so now it's probably less than 2% of the people are involved versus, say, more than 90. Well, that took a couple hundred years for that to happen, maybe 200 to 150 years before you see that big drop. So that's the gradual part. If I go back to the Ernest Hemingway quote, gradually we saw a decline. And if you look at the decline in the graphs, there's a graph in the book we have from the USDA and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It's a straight line down from around 1780 to about 1975. It's like a straight line down in terms of percentage of people working in agriculture. Manufacturing, that's where people went to.
Right.
They would shift out of agrarian into the manufacturing economy. Jobs paid better. Some cases it was very hard work, but in general, I would say it was higher paying, better jobs than working on a farm. I'm not making a value judge. I'm just saying in terms of the wealth that was created. And we started to see that go up, but I think around, I would say in the 1990s, we started to see a lot of offshoring of that work, and the mechanization of that work really drive the jobs down and disconnect it from the productivity. Again, we have another chart here where we show around 2000, we see a decoupling of manufacturing jobs tied to output. And that had a lot to do with the software and mechanization happening in that sector.
Which then, if we look at what's happening today, so now we've got technologies in place and we've got a labor market.
Yeah.
Is there a concentration in wealth that we're going to see get, where the wealth starts to get more concentrated at the top end? And we've got a population, and I know you discuss a lot of this later in later chapters, but can we just get your thoughts on, based on labor market and the reports that we're seeing today, do you think that we will see a larger concentration of wealth?
I do, and I think it goes back to what's different, and that the title, the quote we chose at the beginning of this chapter around Hemingway's gradual, then all of a sudden line. The agrarian change was gradual. The manufacturing changes around automation was gradual, but just faster. It went from generations to decades. So it was, you saw a compression from, say, I'm going to call it close to 200 years down to about 30 years. Mm-hmm. And this is where the all of a sudden comes in. Both of those were analog changes. This software change is happening as a result of digital automation for knowledge workers. But again, both of those automation waves for agrarian and manufacturing had to do with the automation of physical work, which is analog, when we use that in the prior chapter. When we start to replace brain work, that's where it becomes digital, because it's software doing it. So that's the all of a sudden, because software scales very fast. Now, you asked this question about wealth concentration. When I use software to perform the work, if I'm the owner of the business, I no longer have to pay people to perform the work. So all the benefits accrete to me. The cost of production goes way down.
Right.
And if you look at how fast we've created these young billionaires,
yeah,
whether it be a firm like Instagram, who got bought by Facebook for a couple $1 billion. I don't know what they paid. But it was just a dozen, 15
guys,
young guys in the Silicon Valley, and they just all of a sudden, boom, they're instantly wealthy. You see Mark Zuckerberg's one of the most wealthy guys on paper right now. Facebook doesn't employ hardly anybody relative to Walmart or General Motors. Mm. And so the wealth concentration happens for the people who happen to be on top or owners of these digital business models. They tremendous amount of wealth is being created, and it's concentrated. I don't think it's good for society to see the wealth concentration, and it's accelerating. However bad people think it is, it's accelerating. I think Bezos' wealth doubled on paper again in the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, it's just it's fascinating. And I know when we get to a later chapter, we can dig a little bit deeper into that, because I know you've got some exciting stuff around that topic. And before we close out chapter 2, you've got a fascinating the Turing test in the chapter. Can you just give people a little bit of background on what the Turing test was all about? And we've got it in reference to differentiating between cognitive agents and chatbots. And I know this is not a technical book, but I thought the Turing test was quite interesting for our listeners to.
Well, we're trying to, early in the book, to introduce people about some of the technologies, because while we didn't want to be too technical in this book, you do need to understand that the technology that's coming is quite advanced.
Right.
And people have experience with Alexa in their home or Siri on their phone, maybe the Google Assistant if they're using an Android platform. And everyone's played around with it to a little bit. And they said, well, it's never going to replace my job. And that's true. Those technologies that you're probably playing with are not. But you need to understand behind the scenes what's happening is quite sophisticated. And so when machines are start to able to interact with people and extract information and process information through the same kind of way that a knowledge worker might in an office environment, and that, by the way, is coming. It's right around the corner. That has to do with the ability of the agent, of the software agents, to be what's called a cognitive agent, which is the ability to, for you to talk to a chat bot. Mm-hmm. It could be an avatar on a screen. It could be through chat window on your computer screen, or it could even be, sci-fi would like to have it in the form of an android. So there's a thing, Alan Turing in the 1950s, he was a guy worked with the military intelligence in World War II around helping break the German Enigma encryption machine. But he's a mathematician back then. He posed the question, can machines think? Because at the end of the day, to replace knowledge workers, these machines need to think. And there's lots of evidences that they can, but in very limited ways today.
Right.
But the issue is it's progressing rapidly, from beating Garry Kasparov at chess to beating Lee Sedol in the game Go, which is more complex than chess.
Right.
And people said, when they beat chess, they said, well, you'll never beat Go. And then it beat Go. And oh, wow, they were surprised when it happened. And then the next version of the software destroyed the first version that won.
Yeah.
And now you can't even play. The machines dominate this. So they said, well, that's narrow. It's defined. So we talk about the ability of machines to interact with people, and people are funny. They talk weird. They have accents. They change the subject. They're not always rational in the things they say. And how do you process all that information? So if you're a customer service agent, you need to be able to do that if you're going to replace that customer service agent with software. So the Turing test is a test to figure out if I'm interacting with a computer, do I know it's a person or a computer, and I can't tell the difference? And if I can't tell the difference, it's so-called pass the Turing test. So we lay out a very simple test that you can play with your version of Alexa, because I'm sure new versions are coming out all the time, Siri, whatever chatbot or your exposure to. We lay out a couple of examples, simple examples, to show what's difficult and what's happening here. But it's going to change rapidly. So whatever I say today, and I'm reluctant, because in 2 days or 2 months or a few months, it's going to change tremendously.
Did you guys feel Google Duplex was starting to get close?
Yeah, that was launched last year in May, and I've been following it since then. I thought the progression would be more. I think they faked some of it. We get into it. We did a technical breakdown of how Google Duplex. Now, for people don't understand what that is. The Google Assistant, which is the unnamed AI, like it's the Alexa version, but it's on Android, was able to place let's just say a restaurant reservation, but
right.
It actually made a phone call to a restaurant and talked to the people. And the people that were on the other side of taking the reservation didn't know they were talking to a computer. And if you listen to the call scripts, it sounded exactly like two people talking.
Right, yeah.
Now, I'm sure those were curated. They picked the best ones for the demonstration. So we broke down those 5 different technologies that go into making that happen in real time. And again, every one of those technologies is tremendous, but they're all working in conjunction, and they're getting so much better every month, every quarter, that you cannot make a declarative statement, whether it be here, we're sitting here at the end of September in 2019, there is a state of affairs that exists today. Mm-hmm. But in December and January and March of next year, it'll be very different.
Yeah.
So, if people were listening to this 6 months from now, They can say, "Oh, that's old news. That's old news." It's of course we can do that. Well, that's the nature of this change here.
Very rapid. All right. Well, thanks, Tom, for your time. And if you haven't picked up the book, I encourage our listeners to head on over to Amazon, and it's Digital Labor, The Coming Demise of the White Collar Worker. And you can also check out digitallaborbook.com. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to listen to our next episode on Chapter 3, the Rumjog Automation Maturity Model.